Okay, so my name's Azra Guy, and I'm the presenter for Federalist number 10 of the Federalist Papers, written by James Madison. So the main point of the article, a little difficult to grasp, but essentially what it boils down to is that Madison's presenting a problem, right? He's saying that factions within politics have caused, quote, increasing distrust of public engagements and alarm for private rights, end quote, and it is the duty of a well-structured union to divide and control the effects of factions. So basically, you have under a pure democracy, I believe, you have all these different people of interest, all these different groups and factions trying to lobby for their own interests. And this can lead to a lot of chaos, rightfully so, between warring factions and whatnot in politics. And basically says that there are two current methods, or not really great methods, but ways of curing the negative effects of factions. You either remove the cause or you control the effects. The former can't work because in order to get rid of faction, you have to get rid of liberty, because liberty is what he says air is to fire, and to erase liberty, that's, you know, nonsensical. Liberty is what drives politics, and it's an essential component of political life. So, ergo, we have to focus on controlling the effects. So basically, he tries to market a republic with representation or representative government that it can be the cure for the curse of faction. So basically, we choose our representatives that have the knowledge and capability to understand what's truly best for our nation, as compared to like a purely public vote where people of sinister interests or tempers could do harm. And people will be more likely to choose representatives of good character under this system, and it will be harder for unworthy representatives to corrupt politics and education. So we're still keeping factions, but people within those factions can vote for representatives that represent their interests and have them act on their behalf in government, therefore kind of minimizing the effects or keeping it in a very controlled spirit, to my understanding. And I feel like this really relates back to what we were talking about in our previous class section about things like self-interests and the state of nature. And when I was reading the Federalist Papers, Federalist number 10, I couldn't help but think that what he was saying, with all these warring factions and all these conflicts under just no representation, just pure factions going at it, was kind of a lot like the state of nature, where, there was no one to really tell you couldn't fight, so you had to. And let's see. Yeah, and also about self-interests and how we tend to only act for ourselves, which can harm a community as a whole. And he talks a lot about how pure democracy, if allowed, with conflicting factions, can allow for individuals acting just purely for themselves and for their own notions, can propose ideas that would benefit them, but not everyone else. And how this is a form of acting on self-interest, and this would drag down everyone as a whole. The best example I could think of is something that's talked a little bit about in chapter 1 of the book, something called pluralism, where certain groups of interests will offer financial or political support to candidates to enforce their ideas, and this can leave the gateway open to like a lot of corruption. A lot of politicians can forsake their own interests just to get some money from a certain group that's willing to push their campaign. And let's assume there's no rules that say they can't. And this would lead to a really polarized playing field, because the interests and the groups that have power and money, they can act in their self-interests and, drive their ideas forward in politics. But those ideas can drag down everyone as a whole. But, like Madison says, we can't erase factions as a whole, and this is where the Federalists' idea of a federal government and why the Federalist Papers were written, that a republic can cure these deals. That we can't erase the factions altogether, but a representative government is very able to control these effects. It limits the distrust. It limits the distrust. It prevents unworthy or sinister representatives from entering the government, and it allows a small group of people who are selected by the people to act on their behalf. So we're still retaining our sense of liberty in that case, but we are controlling the effects of factions. Because imagine if there was like no representative government, people would just be fighting in their own little groups, and I don't think much would really get done. Now, of course, we can argue like back and forth. Do representatives really represent people's best interests? I don't think so, at least today. But I do think that having, you know, a group of people from a state like Georgia select a representative to act on their best behalf is a lot better than everyone in the state of Georgia just going at it, being in separate groups for like lower taxes or more government control or, you know, lobbying for their own ideals. It would be a lot worse. And we wouldn't get anything done. I don't think these ideas could go to like the highest form of government. Whereas a representative, they can take those ideas, those complaints, and bring them to the main government. Be like, hey, you know, this is what my state is wanting. Can we maybe bring up a compromise for this? Yeah, and I thought that was kind of interesting how his kind of marketing is like, you know, instead of all of us fighting, how about we just come together and, you know, select someone who can work in our best interests and accomplish a lot more compared to a state of nature where we're just all fighting each other. So I thought that was pretty interesting.
Hello, my name is Jacqueline Romagosa. Everybody calls me Jackie.
My name is Danny Flores, and our side of the presentation is that the government is self-interested.
After reading the articles of the Federalist number 10, we can determine that factions are inevitable. There's no way for us to stop them making, just because we as people, we're always gonna look our self-interest first. Madison says that factions are rooted in the human nature and liberty. People also have different opinions and passions, and we cannot make them think just one way. That's when liberty goes away. Also, economic interests were on the page. We are also gonna just look for our self-interest as a nation. So self-interest is naturally created, and then therefore factions. You can't also remove the cause of how factions are caused, just because as the same thing will happen, it will destroy liberty. So present self-interest will require authoritarianism, which is something that we do not support as a nation. So the best solution that Madison found was to control the effects. And how can we do that? With a large republic dilutes factions, because with so many competing self-interests, no single one dominates.
Federalist number 10 can be summarized by saying that Madison admits people are self-interested and that the system uses the competition of those interests to protect liberty. Federalist number 51, Madison also states that ambition must be made to counteract ambition. That is the main premise of our argument here. Madison designs government so each branch's self-interest checks the others. He also says that people in power will guard their own authority, which prevents tyranny. His main point was that men are not angels. Because humans are self-interested, government must be structured to control both the governed and the governors. If men were angels, we wouldn't have government. He also creates a system of checks and balances to rely purely on self-interest, seeing that judges protect judicial powers, Congress guards legislative power, etc., etc. Federalism adds another layer of checks. Both state and federal governments balance one another, creating double security for the people.
And going back to the same point that he was making about checks and balances, it will be like kind of like the same example that we had in class, where we will all gather to uh, go to the same goal, but yet because we didn't have any rules. Some did, and some did follow the rules. So it will be the same example as if no rules were applied. We're not angels. There's still gonna be people who are gonna go over that board and get whatever they want for self-interest. Just to summarize also for the Federalist number 51, Madison doesn't expect virtue. He expects ambition and self-interest. By channeling against ambition, liberty is preserved. And that's what they did. And you can see it through history. It worked out.
James Madison did not design a system that relied on human virtue. He designed one that assumed self-interest. In Federalist number 10, he argued that the factions driven by self-interest are inevitable and that liberty depends on managing them, not eliminating them. In Federalist number 51, he famously wrote, "Ambition must be made to counteract ambition," showing that even within our government, self-interest is the very mechanism that keeps power balanced. The founders built our nation on self-interest, not as a weakness, but as the strongest protection of liberty.
My name is Al Thompson. I am debating the siding with the thought that our founders are true nation builders, and my key topic is the creation of the checks and balances system.
My name is William Renfro, and I'm a debater on the side of the founders who were altruistic nation builders. This is due to a variety of factors, but mostly due to the fact that they created a nation in which it would be difficult for a large group such as even themselves to gain too much power. No person working in their own self-interest would self-sabotage their current and future ability to succeed in attempting to somehow politically control the people for their own gain. The founders engineered a political system that they believed would never consolidate too much power into the hands of too few, and that would represent the people more than their own goals. The latent causes of faction are thus sown in the nature of man. This is a quote directly from the 10th Federalist paper, showing that the founders were conscious of the natural self-serving interests of the people.
I have a quote directly from the 51st Federalist Papers. To what exponent, then, shall we finally resort for maintaining in practice the necessary partition of power among the several departments, as laid down in the Constitution? The only answer that can be given is that all these exterior provisions are found to be inadequate. The defect must be supplied. Even in the early stages of the American government, the founders were very enthusiastic on creating a checks and balances system so that one branch, the legislative, executive, and judicial, will not have one too much power, making it fair for all of America. And there was a story that we learned in class, the tragedy of the commons. It's where every person in the town was a shepherd, and they had a little common area with the grass, and they all put their sheep there. And if people had too much sheep, there wouldn't be enough grass for other people's shepherds. And I thought that really tied in well for our debate. If every individual acted in their own self-interest, then the community would collapse. So if every shepherd said they're going to get more sheep and make more money, then everything would collapse because there'd be too much sheep and not enough food. And in the 10th Federalist paper, James Madison explains that a larger republic is better than a small republic because the more ideas there are in circulation, the harder it is for one single idea to dominate a whole government. James Madison also emphasizes that humans are imperfect and free to think for themselves, making the importance of a checks and balances system even higher. In conclusion, if our founding fathers were truly acting in their own self-interest, we wouldn't have the America we have today. Stated in the Federalist Papers, the Founding Fathers already had plans to combat self-interested ideas, and we still follow those plans to this day.